And welcome to you all who are joining today, the African Forum on Green Economy, Investing in Natural Capital for a Resilient Africa. We'll just give it the obligatory minute to allow others to join and to make their connections onto the Zoom today. And if you're just joining us now, we'll just give it a little bit more time to allow others to connect, and then we'll get started with the webinar. So I think it's time to start now. So welcome everyone to the African Forum on Green Economy, Investing in Natural Capital for a Resilient Africa. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you're all safe and well. A lot of you will be aware that this was planned to be a face-to-face event in Kampala, but obviously due to COVID-19, we've moved this on to an online event. And we've been having some amazing sessions over the last couple of months now. This is the 5th topic that we're going to be covering, and is one that is extremely important. And to be honest, all of the assessments and work that we've seen going on around the world, the one thing we can guarantee is that people will come back to us at some point and say, the problem is data, okay? And that's always an underlying issue. What they mean by data is very difficult to understand, and it often means lots of different things, but it's often a phrase that's being used around natural capital assessments, around understanding change and transformation. So this is going to be an extremely important topic, and we've got a wonderful panel to talk through this and to help us to understand really what it means to you, what it means to Africa, and how we can make improvements with the flow of data. So if we can move on to the next slide, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. So this is a forum that's going to be looking at how green economy and natural capital connect, and how both of these are needed if we're going to have a transformation of the system and support the economy that we all want. Now, first of all, just to give you a little bit of background to what these things mean. A green economy is a way of believing, the belief that we have, that we can achieve a sustainable, inclusive economy which supports prosperity for everyone. And it's important thinking about that prosperity for everyone. This requires not just obviously economics, but also society and the environment as well, and thriving together through a policy which is inclusive. It's about redistributing natural, physical, and financial wealth. And it's a phrase that's being used all around the world, and Uganda being one of the places which is really championing this. If you want to find out more about this, then the best source for this is the Green Economy Coalition, and I would highly recommend going to their website. If we can move on to the next slide. There's also natural capital, and natural capital is the stock of resources that deliver a flow of benefits to people. So it's the benefits that we receive from nature. For all this, there's lots of organizations around the world, and the best source for going to information around this is the Natural Capital Coalition, or more recently, what we've done is we've united the Natural Capital Coalition and the Social and Human Capital Coalition to create the Capitals work. And this is looking at an inclusive approach that connects both nature and people, and becomes even more important when we're trying to build out green economies here as well. This program of work has been delivered by a group of organizations coming together. A lot of them you will have seen on earlier slides, but both the Green Economy Coalition, the Natural Capital Coalition, the Global Green Growth Knowledge Platform, and WWF have been leading a program of work, Economics for Nature, with many other local partners as well. And if we can go on to the last slide for me, Hannah. So what we're trying to do here is 3 things. We're trying to promote understanding. We're trying to connect stakeholders for the long term here, not just through these webinars. And we're also looking to commit to action. And I'm very pleased to say that already we've got lots of bilateral conversations and other work coming out of these webinars. And we hope that today will also lead to even more opportunities for you to work with others on these important topics. I'm now going to pass over to Evelyn, who's going to run us through the program today, introduce all of our speakers. So over to you, Evelyn. Thank you. Evelyn, I think you're on mute still. One of the joys of these webinars. That's it. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction and a very, very warm welcome to you all. My name is Evelyn Atuhaire. I'm an economist with the Ministry of Water and Environment and in Uganda, and facilitator for the technical working group for the Uganda Natural Capital Accounting Program supported by the Waves World Bank. Thank you for making time to join us for this fifth session of the Africa Forum on Green Economy. As earlier mentioned, the theme for today's session is data for decision making, and the topic is how can we best apply natural capital accounting and data to unlock green economic opportunities. We have 4 excellent speakers with us today. Dr. Asen Sanon from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Burkina Faso, Mr. Kagwa Ronald, National Planning Authority, Uganda, Ms. Ulrika Troja from the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research, and Philippe Pudaho from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Switzerland. We will hear from each of them and some introductory perspectives about their work and their experience on how they think data can be better used to unlock green economic opportunities. Thereafter, we will have an open discussion with you all. A bit of guidance on the practical aspects of the meeting to help us have an interactive discussion and maximize the time we have. Kindly use the Q&A button to type your questions to the speakers at any point. We will answer them at the end. The Q&A button is at the right-hand side corner of your screen. You will automatically be muted, which means we cannot hear you. If you have something to say, please click raise your hand. If you want to share a general comment, you can have a conversation in the chat dialog box. I ask our 4 speakers to limit their remarks between 6 and 8 minutes maximum so as to have enough time for the discussion and wrap up in the hour planned for the meeting. We will start with Mr. Kagwa Ronald from Uganda. Since 2015, Ronald has been working at Uganda National Planning Authority as Head of Production, Trade and Tourism Planning. In this role, he has coordinated the development of the Uganda Green Growth Development Strategy, sector strategic plans, and was a member of the national team on the pilot water accounts, the Uganda World Bank Waves Partnership, and the Uganda UNEP WCMC Biodiversity Accounting Program. Ronald has also participated in the formulating and implementing of Uganda Vision 2040, the 3 national development plans, and various sector policies and strategic plans, as well as numerous international initiatives such as Rio +20 negotiations, open working discussions on sustainable development goals, various conferences of parties on biodiversity, and international meetings on green economy and natural capital accounting. I'll now turn the floor over to Ronald. Ronald, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Evelyn, for that generous introduction. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, first of all, to give the context of and rationale for information and data on natural capital. If I look at Uganda, ours is a natural resource-based economy. We depend on natural capital for employment, economic growth, exports, and all that. Therefore, it's critical that we manage this natural capital very well for the employment of our people and the earning of foreign exchange. We're also working from a context where the demand for natural capital is increasing. Now, while the demand for natural capital is increasing, it's also amidst rising degradation. And these have got implications on livelihoods, food security, economic growth. And there is also a threat that the envisaged socio-economic transformation may be threatened if natural capital is not managed very well. Uganda is also a vulnerable economy, vulnerable to many shocks, natural shocks, the climate change, and now the COVID-19 shock. The question is, how do we build a resilient economy that can withstand the shocks? Again, much as we rely on natural capital, there is use of prices and market prices here, markets, to move or to based on our decisions. Decision making is based on market prices, and these are market-based decisions. But as you may know, many natural resources do not have market prices. Ecosystem services don't have market prices. They are therefore left out in a market-based decision-making process. And as you are again aware, in this Ugandan country, we are living in a complex environment where there are so many competing decisions, many competing demands on natural resources. The need for trade-offs to be made, and trade-offs require proper analysis, proper data, if we are to make meaningful trade-offs. We are also committed to many international and regional agreements, the Aichi targets, the SDGs, the national targets, the Vision 2040, the development plan. All these require data. So we are living in a world which requires a lot of data, and this data is not easy to come by. Therefore, to make strategic decisions, to make a good planning, we need data at all levels of natural resource management, and therefore there is an urgent need for reliable data to support natural resource planning and decision making. Allow me, Evelyn, to introduce you to some of the works which Uganda is carrying out at the moment. One of the key deliverables that Uganda has made recently is the National Development Plan, NDP3, and its result and monitoring frameworks. Now, this plan is to be launched on 1st July this year, when the new financial year begins. The focus of NDP3 is sustainable industrialization. Industrialization which is based on natural resources. Now the question is, do we have enough resources to sustain the industrialization drive? So what investments do we need to make in natural capital, human capital, and produced capital to see that the development plan is implemented? Again, through different partnerships, we are developing fisheries, land degradation, tourism accounts with the support from UNEP, WCMC under the Darwin Initiative. This initiative is to bring a lot of good information and data, which will be critical to decision making. We also have the WAVES partnership supported by the World Bank, through which we are developing land, forest, wetland, and the forest ecosystem accounts. Again, these will give a lot of data that will support decision making. Uganda also carries out biomass studies. This is done by the National Forest Authority, and this produces a lot of information on the trends of our forest resources and other resources. So we have accomplished many works, and some of these are our recent accomplishments. We launched the Uganda National Capital Accounting Program in 2019. That was launched. The water accounts are being finalized with support from UNSD. The experimental ecosystem accounts were done in 2017, and this was done with the support from UNEP WCMC. The land and physical asset accounts were launched in September 2019. These were done by WAVES program. The forest accounts are being prepared. And we also have a national plan for advancing environmental economic accounting, which was launched in 2019. And many other supportive studies were done. For example, macroeconomic indicators, to support and inform the national development plan process. So there are quite a number of activities that are going on, which will enrich the decision-making process and which will give us a lot of data. Maybe another issue that I want to look at, Evelyn and the colleagues, is how can natural capital data be used for decision-making in Africa and Uganda here in particular? It's critical for tracking the changing trends of natural capital stocks and flows. Natural capital is changing and we need to track this change. And using time series data, we can track this change. Changes in forests. We can also identify the major drivers of this change. And this information is critical for identifying the trade-offs and then inform win-win policies that we can design, and also inform investment and business decisions, both by the public and the private sectors. Now, NDP3 looks at sustainability indicators. We are looking at, is our natural capital changing? How is it changing? We have forest indicators, sustainability indicators, wetland indicators, and these are monitored in our reporting frameworks. And I'm sad to report that we're not doing very well on sustainability indicators. This is where Uganda's performance is poor. We're losing the forest cover, we're losing the wetland cover. So this is, again, very, very critical in informing policies. We're also using many economic instruments, fees, charges, taxes on natural resources, subsidies and these enforcement mechanisms. So natural capital data can inform what taxes do we levy, what fees do we levy, how do we use these fees, okay? And what are the returns on investment? We are living in a very constrained environment. Fiscal space is low. So we need to put our resources where the returns are high. Again, we are looking at this data to guide investment decisions to where returns are high. I'll give you an example. Tourism is the leading foreign exchange earner for Uganda. The returns per unit investment in tourism is very high compared to other investments. So using this data, we can identify returns on investment and therefore guide decision-making and investment decisions. Supporting evidence-based planning, sector planning, we can build scenarios using data, and this can inform our decision-making. A key issue that we have looked at, that we have seen, is how do we share data? There is a challenge of sharing data at the national level and international levels. One thing that I want to say in Uganda here, we are moving towards institutionalization of natural capital data, collection and analysis. We are moving towards having institutions with units which collect data as part of their mandates, having manpower that looks at data, statistical data. The Uganda Bureau of Statistics is one of them. The NFA, the National Forest Authority, is one of them. We're also forming working groups, natural capital partnership, the forum, like this forum that we are on, the African Forum on Green Economy. These are very good opportunities where we can share data. We have also established partnerships with producers of capital of data, users of data, and especially the policy application of data. So these opportunities, we are exploiting them, and these are bearing some fruits in sharing the highly scarce but sought after natural capital data. Evelyn, now allow me to stop here for the time being. I'll come in as required. I thank you, colleagues, for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronald, and thank you very much for the points that you have shared. Our dear audience, if you've just joined in, we've heard from Mr. Kagwa Ronald from the National Planning Authority, Uganda. And among the things he has spoken about is how natural capital data can be used. And some of the things he's pointed out is it is critical for tracking trends of stocks and flows, critical for informing policies and policy indicators, Data can be used to inform physical instruments, to be used on natural resources, and it can also be used for evidence-based planning and guiding investment.
No, not
Next, we shall hear from Dr. Asen Sanon from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Burkina Faso. Asen is an engineer in agronomy. He holds a PhD in environmental sciences and has previously worked as a researcher on soil health and sustainable agricultural system development. In 2011, Asen joined IUCN in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Since 2019, Asen has coordinated an EU-funded project dealing with governance of protected areas in West Africa. This 4-year project embraces several dimensions of biodiversity and protected areas governance in West Africa. This includes establishing regional capacity on natural capital accounting as a way to support decision-making processes in countries who depend on natural capital for their development. Asen is also the acting regional coordinator for the Protected Areas and Biodiversity Program of IUCN, PACO. Asen, over to you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to participate to this panel and share with you some insights emanating from a couple of initiatives dealing with capacity and knowledge development we are dealing currently at IUCN PACO to support decision-making and action. Next slide, please. As it is a common practice, gross domestic product generally measures a country's economic performance. However, this indicator looks at only one part of economic performance, that is income, but says nothing about wealth and assets that underlies this income, and has a consequence, nothing about the longer-term sustainability of current growth patterns. Wealth accounting, including natural capital accounting, is inevitably needed to sustain growth. The issue is especially important in developing countries depending on natural capital for up to 47% of their wealth, as per a World Bank publication on 2018. Next slide, please. Very quickly, the NCA model we are using in the Fouta-Djallon landscape, then the Fouta-Djallon is a transboundary areas between the Republic of Guinea and Senegal in West Africa. Then this model quantifies the capability of the ecosystem, which includes ecosystem productivity and ecosystem health, and thus determines the stock and natural flows in 3 domains that are ecosystem carbon account, ecosystem water account, and ecosystem infrastructure account. The model will also be extended to additional landscape in West Africa to extend the scope of our work. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have the preliminary result of the Fouta-Djallon landscape. The ecosystem carbon account and ecosystem infrastructure account are presented here. Note that these results are preliminary and still need to be confirmed by local experts. But in the meantime, on the left side, you can see the first result on the carbon stock in the region from 2000 to 2015. And on the right side, you can see the first result of the net landscape ecosystem potential account in the Fouta-Djallon landscape. This infrastructure account will further be extended with metrics like biodiversity measurements at both species and biotope level, intoxication by chemicals, and population health. Next slide, please. But the important and challenging dimension of our work at IUCN PACO is that our initiatives go beyond the establishment of only natural capital accounts and embraces a more integrated model based on cross-sectoral approach, mixing up multidimensional expertise. Indeed, our intervention concurrently includes measuring and monitoring of protected areas' performance to also generate data that will go to feed a regional reference information system. Importantly, a couple of regional observatories are also in development through our undergoing initiatives to constitute ultimate receptacles of the data. And at the same moment we develop the tools, we also intend to establish a regional capability through capacity development of the users to allow them appropriately perform and handle the data generation process. In addition to this, we aim at setting up a sort of regional multi-stakeholder body that will gather expertise on biodiversity conservation and sustainable development from West Africa. And this body will be in charge of translating data and information emanated from the project in knowledge and messages that will present more chance to be audible by decision and policymaker. Because one thing is to produce data, the other thing is to be able to use them. And to fully ensure the buy-in and ownership of this knowledge and information in the region and incentivize informed decision and policymaking, we foresee a couple of activities, including first, the development and adoption by ECOWAS states member of a regional framework that will facilitate biodiversity and protected areas mainstreaming into regional sectoral plans, strategies, and policies. And also, we will facilitate the participation of decision and policymakers to important conferences all around the world dealing with conservation and sustainable development issues to popularize findings and key messages from West African region and incentivize further pro-conservation pledges. We anticipate that all these initiatives will help contribute to the broader objective of transitioning towards a green economy and achieving sustainable development. Next slide, please. In conclusion, allow me to share some insights and few challenges that emerge from our work. First of all, credible and accurate data must be available, ideally through open sources. This is a critical aspect towards information and knowledge generation and should determine both the quality and quantity of dimensions that the natural capital accounts could capture. Equally, availability of local competencies to handle the process is vital and will determine the prosperity of the concept. Second, data generation in support to decision-making and policy-making should be perceived as a cross-sectoral collaboration, and such an approach should give additional chance to capture the multidimensional facets of nature. And to finish, let me say that it is still a need of demonstration of the relevance of the concept to decision and policymakers, as well as to businesses contributing to nature depletion. It is therefore of critical importance to come out with audible knowledge and information to incentivize toward a green economy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Aston Fanon, and thank you for the presentation and the notes you've just shared with us. Ladies and gentlemen, if you just joined us, we have so far listened to two speakers. That is Mr. Kagwa Ronald from the National Planning Authority, Uganda, and Dr. Asen Sanon from the International Union for Conservation of Nature, Burkina Faso. And thank you, panelists, for keeping time. We shall now look at ecosystem services assessments in Africa and Central Asia. She is currently scientific advisor to the GIZ UFZ Green Value Initiative, implementing 3 case studies in Africa where natural capital perspective on conservation areas is applied to local and regional decision making. Before Iruke speaks, I would encourage our audience, in case you have questions, please use the question tab at the right-hand side corner of your screen to share with us. Over to you, Iruke.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. I hope you can hear and see me all right, because I don't really hear and see anything. I'm today speaking on behalf of the Green Value Initiative. As Evelyn pointed out, it was commissioned by the Federal German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and is executed by GIZ with scientific and technical support of the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research, UFZ. And the initiative seeks to highlight the value of conservation areas for development and prosperity in Africa, applying a natural capital perspective. We advocate for a paradigm shift that combines biodiversity conservation and development. The green, next slide, please. The Green Value Initiative focuses on conservation areas in Africa and takes a two-tiered approach. On the one hand, there's a continent-wide report based on available data sets and then a set of 6 case studies focusing on 6 specific conservation areas in Cote d'Ivoire, in Madagascar, in Morocco, Mauritania, DRC, and Ethiopia. Especially for the continent-wide report, but also for the case studies, we pragmatically combine available data with the application of then an ecosystem services natural capital perspective to value the natural capital of conservation area, highlight interlinkages and identify trade-offs for conservation and development that come with different uses, and then in order to contribute to hopefully an increasing acceptance for protected area for development. We work with partners and local stakeholders in landscapes where these conservation areas exist. So that participatory approach is one that in the case studies we really focus on. And we seek to inform a problem situation or a specific decision process. So this is why this first scoping phase of really understanding, what is the problem, what is the context, what are the social constraints in an area, and then elaborating that into a research question takes a lot of time, and then determines also the search for data. I have brought you 2 examples, both based around hydropower, which doesn't mean that we focus on hydropower, but I think to show a little bit the difference between the continent-wide report and the case studies. So next slide, please. African countries have a very high demand for energy that still needs to be met, and hydropower is a promising source since it's stable and also renewable. And in the continent-wide report, we combined different data sets and found that already 19 African countries rely on hydropower for more than 50% of their total electricity production, with 3 of them exceeding that share to even 80%, which doesn't mean that this is enough. So there is, as I said, more energy demands to be met in the future. For hydropower, conservation areas are important because they keep hydrological systems intact. They effectively reduce soil erosion, and since sedimentation due to soil erosion is the one big factor which determines a dam's lifespan, it is important to think about upstream soil protection and reduction of soil erosion. So you see here this example, so I just took out one where we narrowed in a little bit on Kenya, but also on other countries where we overlapped African hydropower reservoirs as they stand today with their watersheds and hydrologies, and then looking at conservation areas in that region. And as you see here, for Kenya, it's about 25% of the watersheds that feed into dams are protected, in one case, even none. However, for countries with significant hydropower capacity, sufficient watershed protection is critical for the overall energy security. So the description that we are making here with data with numbers, we hope can leverage a debate for responsible expansion of hydropower paired with watershed protection measures, where multiple co-benefits that arise from electricity production on the one hand and conservation on the other hand can then be brought into the debate as well, and possibly add to that argument. Next slide, please. The other example focusing on one of the case studies is the Lomami National Park in DRC. One of the main problems of that protected areas is local ownership. It's a fairly new park, and the development needs in that region are extremely high. So electricity production could be one of the activities reconciliating conservation activities and development, since electricity is an important element to enable people to participate in social life, take ownership, starting, for example, with cornerstones such as education and e-education in remote areas, such as around the Lomami National Park. So the provisioning and regulating functions of the national parks for hydropower facilities can be strengthened and explained, and integrating that function of the park into development planning and the national parks public outreach can possibly increase acceptance of the park and raise local ownership. So what we've done in our fieldwork is in village focus groups, we ask participants to identify small-scale hydropower sites based on gradient and falls, where then possibly within a development planning process, small hydropower plants could be established. Second, a literature review revealed that hydropower sites are already identified in the north of the park with a bigger potential megawatt-wise by expert opinion. And then still remaining as an assessment of 2 existing dams that are on the frontier with the park and the landscape. So while we're currently validating the results with our local and national stakeholders in DRC, we hope that one of the outcomes of this data, numbers, could actually lead to formulation of a narrative that goes as such that electricity is an important input for development. Hydropower is a stable and clean source for electricity. But hydropower also needs watershed protection, thus effective conservation measures via the national park in this case. So these are 2 examples. I would like to leave you with 3 points in the end. First of all, data itself is not enough. I guess most of you know this, and we already heard about this as well. The multiple international and continent-wide reports have shown that protecting natural capital is important. This alone does not trigger sufficient action, though, to protect it. Second, natural capital assessments provide important figures, but they need to be more strongly reviewed and communicated in the light of development decisions. And this includes questions of distribution, of equity, and it might maybe need to go as far as to debating what prosperity means for a group of people, for a society, in a political dialogue. And third, I think, and also Arsène touched upon that, I think we really need to strengthen the ability to understand data and interpret it in the light of socio-political contexts and power plays. So how can we make numbers and dependencies more relevant for political discussions, also in questions of communicative capacities and networks? Okay, this is where I would like to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Uruka. And those are brilliant insights and examples you've shared there. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to our next speaker, Philippe Puydaro. Is a conservation economist and policy advisor with an expertise on a range of topics, including natural capital methodology and accounting, conservation, finance, and industrial policy. Prior to joining IUCN, Philippe was head of the Global Public Goods Unit in the department in charge of economics with the French Ministry of Environment. In addition to leading the French assessment of ecosystems and ecosystem services, he worked closely on green economy and climate change issues, including innovative finance, links between trade and environment, and international governance on natural resources. Philippe is currently on natural capital accounting working on natural capital accounting in Gabon, which he is going to talk about today. Over to you, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Evelyn, for the nice introduction, and good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to present briefly the work that IUCN is doing to develop natural capital accounts in Gabon with the support of ONF International. This project is funded by AFD, the French Agency for Development. The IUCN is implementing the project in partnership with WWF France and WWF Gabon. The project was launched last October. We started with a workshop organized in Libreville in order to list the questions which are relevant for policymakers. We met with officials, including the ministerial department in charge of statistics and national accounts, to define the objectives of the project. We have understood that developing natural capital accounts is not enough. We must link these accounts to the needs of policymakers. We have to link numbers and narratives. So we tried to discover what concerns the public and private decision makers. We have identified several key questions. For instance, how could we support the minister in charge of the environment when he has to negotiate for budget allocation? How could we support the conservation policy regarding especially protected areas and threatened species? So that questions are not only about numbers and figures, but also about the narrative. Gabon has a very rich natural capital with rich biodiversity, important water and wood resources. Natural capital is seen as a potential source of income for the country, especially for the development of ecotourism. Next slide, please. This slide is about the story of the goose that laid golden eggs. A very sad story, actually. The farmer had a goose. The goose was laying golden eggs. So he thought that there was a treasury in the goose, and he killed the goose. Poor guy. Natural capital, like the goose, is like the goose. Natural capital provides flows of goods and services, the golden eggs, and is a source of income. So the question is, are we improving or degrading natural capital in Gabon? Are we killing the goose? Next slide. Yes, thanks. To address the question, we use the methodology published by the Secretariat of the CBD and called the ENCA for Ecosystem Natural Capital Accounts. The same method presented by Arsène. This method is easy to implement, quick and low cost. And because the problem is about data, this method can be adjusted to the available data that we have. The method provides 4 accounts: a land account, a carbon account, a water account, and an ecological infrastructure account. For each account, we have table figures, and maps. So we don't just have, for instance, the tons of carbon sequestrated by forest, but we also have information about where is the stock and how the stock is evolving between two dates. Next slide, please. Here is, for example, the map showing the ecological infrastructure account with a specific focus on the changes between 2000 and 2010. On this map, the red areas are showing where ecological infrastructure are being degraded. The green areas are showing where ecological infrastructures are going better. We can see that most of the map is in yellow. That shows the stability of the status of the ecological infrastructure in Gabon. This is consistent with other indicators. On the left, we have the red list index calculated for Gabon, showing the relative stability of species survival in this country. In addition, we can see areas in red in the north and in the south where human activities are developing. So we can see with this map that the methodology is consistent with other sources of data. Next slide, please. To complete these results, we have mapped the habitat of 3 emblematic threatened species: gorillas in black, chimpanzees in brown, and elephants in gray. We have also mapped the protected areas, including national parks, hunting reserves, and other categories of protected areas. Then we have assessed the changes affecting the ecological infrastructure account in the habitats of these 3 species and in protected areas. Next slide, please. The results are quite interesting. Here, we can see that the habitat of the 3 species are a bit fragmented. This is what we can see on the left side of the slide. The graph on the right shows that the ecological infrastructure is being degraded in the habitat of each species, and the worst is for gorillas. That means that we have to be very cautious if we don't want to kill the goose. If the government wants to develop ecotourism based on emblematic species, it is necessary to develop conservation measures in the meantime. So the next question is about the protected areas. Are the protected areas efficient measures? Next slide. We have mapped the different categories of protected areas, including national parks, hunting reserves, etc. Then we assessed fragmentation and the changes of natural capital values in the different categories of protected areas, as you can see on this slide. Next slide, please. On the graphs, you can see that fragmentation is lower in national parks than in hunting reserves, for instance. We have the national parks in green and the hunting reserves in yellow, for example. National parks can be seen as efficient measures to limit fragmentation. We have quite the same results with degradation of ecological infrastructures on the right side of the slide. The degradation is less significant in national parks than in other categories of protected areas. This result shows that conservation works. The key learning is that we can develop ecotourism. There is a huge potential in Gabon, but we need to be very careful with the development of infrastructure in order to limit fragmentation and degradation of natural habitat of species. Next slide, please. To conclude, this natural capital country pilot has confirmed that ENCA is an efficient tool to produce low-cost and quick natural capital accounts. The results are relevant to address specific questions and can support decision-making. It's really important for us to develop accounts useful for decision makers. To finish, I would like to say thank you to all the colleagues involved in that project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you for the excellent examples and the brilliant analogy. Are we killing the goose? I will now open the discussion to our audience, to our listeners, and I'll start with some questions that have been posed in the Q&A box. And I'll make an effort to merge up most of the questions because most of them are similar. One is one from Harriet and another from Najema. What are the lessons? What do the panelists have examples of best practices in data sharing? And if you could give as many examples as possible. And are there opportunities for cross-country learning on natural capital accounting and data and mainstreaming of nature in economic policies? I think what they're looking for is examples and best practices in data sharing. This is open to the panel, and any of you could take up the question.
Maybe I go ahead. So from my experience, and I look specifically at case studies, there was a question about supply and demand driven. I think with the scoping, we try to make them very demand driven by framing the research question together with local stakeholders. With regards to data gathering, my experience is that that's a very tedious work, since data also in the different authorities and administrations is really, really scattered, sometimes only available on paper in very remote parts of countries where we sometimes work. Another problem that I find, and this is maybe addressing it back to the scientific community that I'm also now kind of part of, is that there is a tendency to hold on to data that's actually valuable to many more people, and I would really like to encourage everyone who has the ability to make the data publicly available to do that in a way that other can profit from that. That's I find that very frustrating sometimes, but I don't have a solution, and I think it's one of the biggest challenges.
Thank you, Ulka. Yes, Hassan?
Yes, I would like to add something on the question related to concrete example of data sharing. Yes, in our case, our expectation is after when we will generate all this data on NCA, on IMET, on green listing, red listing, and other ways to generate data, we will gather them in regional observatories, and these observatories are supposed to be free access, at least for West African countries, but I think beyond. So this could be a very strong way or a source of data that could help decision makers, policy makers, even businesses to get information. And again, as we will work to transform this data in information and knowledge, all these information will also be publicly shared. And we think that this is a great way to let policymakers be sensitized to the need to transform our ways of production, our ways of consumption. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. There's a question here that is being posed directly to Ronald, and I'll merge two questions that are similar on waste management. There's a question asking how have we addressed the weaknesses of solid waste management policy and enforcement and its impacts on natural resources and human health. And one Tomohai said, Gracious is asking if there if there's something being done to provide data in waste management. Ronald, would you want to pick up that question?
Thank you, Evelyn, and thank you, our partners for asking that question. I want to begin with the one on waste management. There are quite a number of initiatives on waste management. If I can give the Ugandan example, we have the National Environmental Management Authority in Uganda that coordinates environmental management issues in the country. It does collect data on waste management, which is published in the State of the Environment report. The urban authorities, including the Kampala Capital City Authority, they also collect data on waste management. And there are quite a number of studies that have been done on waste management. So we have data on different waste profiles. However, allow me to say that we need to do more to collect more data on waste management. Evelyn, remind me of the next question. What was the second question that you wanted me to look at? Evelyn, is there any other question you want me to look at?
I think there's a question that was raised by Abisha, but you answered it on what are the examples of on how we have applied natural capital accounting in our NDP3. I think that you answered. Maybe if you'd want to address it here as well.
Okay. The National Development Plan NDP3 is Uganda's development framework for the next 5 years. Now, this framework is to guide the development interventions at different levels. Now, we look at natural capital in this framework as a key opportunity to be harnessed for socio-economic transformation. Natural capital issues are captured in the goal and theme of NDP3, which looks at sustainable industrialization, inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. Uganda is a natural resource-based economy. It depends on natural capital to drive agro-based industrialization, the tourism sector. So these sectors are reflected in the National Development Plan. If you look at the monitoring results framework of NDP3, it has natural capital indicators. It has sustainability indicators that are monitored from year to year to see how we are moving on natural capital. There are also strategic interventions captured in especially the environment, land, and the water resource program, where natural capital is one of the interventions that are looked at, and the strategic interventions on promoting natural capital use are captured in this. So our monitoring and resource framework has natural capital indicators. The challenge now is to get data to feed into these indicators on an annual basis, such that by the end of 5 years, we can know what progress we've made on natural capital. I thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. I have a few questions directed towards Philip. One is asking whether you could share the link to the report that you had spoken about in your presentation, and also what methodology was used. And also, there's another question as well on how did the national administrations in Gabon verified / created trust in the outcome numbers of the created accounts? Philip?
Yes, thanks for the questions. I have shared the link to the publication about ENCA, the methodology. The publication was the document was published by the Secretariat of the CBD. So this is available online. Then I would like to say that the methodology. Sorry.
About it for the questions that we've had, I'll encourage our panelists to, if possible, answer most of the questions as they come in on the Q&A box.
Okay.
Now time to, thank you so much, our panelists. Now time to Mark and ask if you could wrap it up.
Thank you very much, and a really interesting conversation. I would really encourage you all that have taken part here today to go onto the website at the African Forum on greeneconomy.com, where you'll find a lot more information about this topic. As you can see, we've already run sessions on water, agriculture, finance, infrastructure, and today on data. There's one more that we will be doing on the 1st of July, and that is how does all of this come back together to actually create the change that we need to see? And data is going to play an essential part in that, as we heard today. So thank you once again to all of our speakers and to Evelyn for hosting in such a wonderful way. Thank you, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.